Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Renaissance Men podcast. I am Michael Parilla.
And I'm Vishal Shah.
And this is the second episode of the weekly review. Now, before we get started, I would like to apologize to all of our viewers for not hosting our show for the past several weeks. We've had lots of issues in regards to our encoding software, but also with some of our USB ports. So we've had to get some new equipment and switch some of our software around, experiment a little bit. But we think we have a setup now that should work, and hopefully from now on we'll be able to consistently provide the show to all of you on a weekly basis.
Yep.
So, moving forward, today we are going to be talking about the Jeffrey Epstein situation. I'm sure many of you know who Jeffrey Epstein is. He is for those of you who don't, I suppose I should start from the beginning. He is a very, very wealthy financier who has connections with a variety of people from all over the world. But he really came into the spotlight in 2008 when he was convicted of sexually abusing child prostitutes, for which he was sentenced to 18 months in prison. But he only served 13 months of that sentence, and during those 13 months, for 12 hours out of the day, half of every day, he was allowed to leave the prison, and he employed his own personal security detail. So essentially, he only really, if you take like a strict time percentage, he was only really in prison for about 6.5 months, even though it was proven that he was engaging in sex with underaged people.
Just to be clear, you did hear him correctly. That was months, not years, months.
Yes. So then, that was in 2008. In 2019, this past July, Epstein was arrested again in New Jersey on sex trafficking charges. And as many people know, a month later, he was found dead in his cell. Now, when the story first broke, and ABC News was the first news outlet to break the story, they reported Epstein's death by suicide. Many news outlets reported that his death was by suicide. It was announced pretty early that it was by suicide, but they still had to do quite a bit of investigating and an autopsy before really determining whether or not it was a suicide officially.
Right. And, I know you're going to go into that a little bit, but there were some suspicious circumstances based around that, so
many.
I'll let you go into the details regarding that.
Yeah, so to begin, it was claimed that Epstein had hung himself using the prison bed sheets. The thing about this, though, is that the bed sheets that they use in prison are specifically designed to prevent inmates from being able to use them to hang themselves. So it's very unlikely that he would have been able to do this. Additionally, his autopsy was performed by the New York City Medical Examiner's Office under the authority of a Dr. Barbara Sampson, the chief medical examiner. And Epstein's legal team also hired Michael Baden. So I think I should talk about this guy for a little bit, because he's quite prolific. He is, over the course of his career, had investigated the assassinations of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., former president of the United States John F. Kennedy, and he identified the bodies of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and Nazi physician Joseph Mengele. And he testified as a defense witness in the trial of O.J. Simpson. So this guy has been involved in a lot of very high-profile deaths and autopsies. And while initially Epstein's death was ruled a suicide, at the end of this past October, Michael Baden said that Epstein's autopsy was much more consistent with homicide given the broken bones in his neck, including 2 fractures on the left and right sides of his larynx and 1 fracture on the left hyoid bone, leading him to believe the cause of death to be strangulation. So I just want to stop for a second and say that while I am not an expert on forensics, I did take a forensics class when I was in college, and one of the lessons that we would go over was suspected suicides that ended up being homicides. And the way that they always found out and specifically in hanging cases, the way they always found out that a hanging was meant to look like a suicide but was actually a homicide was by finding broken bones in the throat. Because in order to break someone's bones by hanging them, you actually have to drop them from a significant height so that the fall ends up creating a snap in the neck, and then that breaks their bones. That breaks their neck. But there's no way that Epstein could have done this in his cell. There's simply not enough room for that. And so if he were to have killed himself with these bed sheets, he would have had to lean into them and essentially asphyxiate himself, which would not have caused the broken bones in his neck. So how they've ruled this as a suicide makes me very suspicious of the people who were leading the official autopsy. Now, Michael Baden was brought in by Epstein's family as a sort of personal examiner, but he wasn't part of the official medical examiner team. And so while the official team ruled it a suicide, he is now saying that it's much more likely to be a homicide. And frankly, I would agree with him based on what I know about how you would determine whether or not it's suicide or homicide. And at the very least, these broken bones should spur on some kind of investigation. I mean, this would be suspicious in any other case.
Right. And I mean, the internet has definitely picked up on this fact. All over the internet, doesn't matter what it is, you'll find a comment somewhere that says Epstein wasn't murdered. That Epstein was murdered, that he did not commit suicide. And it's actually become much of a meme, so
absolutely.
The internet has definitely taken pretty strongly to this. And on top of that, there are more suspicious circumstances on top of that. And in fact, do you go into a little bit regarding the fact that he was on a suicide watch at the time?
Well, we're going to get into that, but real quick, continuing with the line that I was following. So, following his death, the investigation into his actions was ended with the statement that because Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant. Oh, actually, wait. So I just want to say one more thing about why this is also very suspicious. And it is that following the investigation, following his death, it was stated that because Jeffrey Epstein, the defendant in his case, died while the case was pending, and therefore before final judgment was issued, the indictment must be dismissed. So this is another thing that I think has led a lot of people to being very suspicious, because his death essentially means that any investigation that was being done into him and into his connections with other people in regards to his sex trafficking ended, all because he died. And so this has made a lot of people much more suspicious.
So anyone who might have helped him do what he was doing, or might have been part of that, might have been participating in the exact same things he was doing, quite frankly could have gotten away with that.
Yeah.
And the investigation has been ended in this capacity, so that was all left to question.
Yeah, and now going back to the point you made before, I believe, about him being on suicide watch. So
there's more than one suspicious circumstance within his detainment area specifically.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot here, a lot to cover. So we're gonna try and do it get to everything as best we can, but there is so much information here, so many inconsistencies, so many things that would draw suspicion. That I don't think it's any wonder why the meme has spread the way that it has.
Right.
I don't think anyone is buying the official story that he committed suicide. And so along those lines, 2 weeks before he was found dead, it was reported that he had attempted to commit suicide, and he had injuries to his neck as a result of this. But Epstein told his lawyers that he had been assaulted by his cellmate, Nicholas Tartaglione, who was an ex-cop and was in prison for murdering 4 men as part of a cocaine-related conspiracy. And following this, Epstein was put on suicide watch. Now, I should mention that his cellmate Tartaglione denies having tried to attack him, and I think that it is probably unlikely that he did, simply because I've seen pictures of this guy. He is huge, and if he wanted to kill Epstein, I think he very easily could have done so with little effort. Like, this guy's actually ripped.
Okay.
Yeah.
He is a former cop as well, so that definitely adds some oomph to that statement, I'm sure.
Yeah. But regardless, Epstein was put on suicide watch, and then he was given a psych evaluation, after which it was determined that he was not a risk to himself and taken off of suicide watch. After Epstein's death, it was revealed that, and another point, after Epstein's death, it was revealed that there were malfunctions in cameras watching Epstein's cell the day that he died. So, yet another reason to be suspicious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these kinds of things, you know, they all just don't add up to anything good. And furthermore, prison regulations in the prison that he was staying in called for Epstein to be checked on once every 30 minutes, specifically because he was a very high-profile inmate. But however, the day he was found dead, he was left alone and unmonitored as a result of reported understaffing at the facility in which he was being held. Additionally, one of the guards who was watching Epstein was only a trainee and not a fully fledged officer. So they didn't even have fully trained officers watching one of the most high-profile inmates with an unbelievable number of connections.
Who happened to also be a catalyst for quite possibly one of the most important investigations, or maybe recognizable investigations in recent history, perhaps in our lifetimes. I mean, going back, and just because we wanted to do this chronologically, I want to point out this man had an entire island where it is known that he was sexually assaulting kids, and that he also had a plane called the Lolita Express where he was doing the exact same thing. Now, not only does Bill Clinton have flight record, there are multiple very prominent people with flight records to show that they were on the Lolita Express, as well as many others who could have been on his island. And so, it's almost like we had busted a major drug ring, and we assumed that only one person was responsible for it. And because that one person is deceased, that we just threw away the rest of the investigation. It would be practically impossible for something like this, of this scale, to be produced without any outside help. I mean, that'd be like Batman building the whole Batcave. Yeah,
and so in regards to that, you really do have to ask yourself whether or not there was some sort of conspiracy, or whether or not this is the result of just incompetence of the highest magnitude possible. But along those lines, going back to the lack of guards and the failings of the guards, it was also reported by NBC that Epstein's guards are under investigation for sleeping on the job and fudging records. So, whether this is less conspiratorial and more so in the vein of sheer incompetence. I mean, finding people sleeping on the job, and I'll get more into the fudging records later, because that is actually important. But also, the morning that Epstein was found dead, there was reported shrieking from his jail cell, with corrections officers attempting to revive him, saying, "Breathe, Epstein, breathe." However, Tartaglione, Epstein's former cellmate, who had been moved to a nearby cell hours before his death, claims to have heard nothing. Tartaglione also alleged to have been threatened by guards in the prison because he was damaging information. He had damaging information concerning them. So this is where it starts to become a little bit more conspiratorial. It's unclear who exactly was telling the truth, whether or not they were in fact saying "Breathe, Epstein, breathe." Now, Tartaglione's his former cellmate had been moved into the cell directly next to his after he was accused of having attacked Epstein. He doesn't recall ever hearing this, but even if they did hear that, even if he did hear this, even if it was said, it's kind of funny. Like, I've seen some people joking about potentially guards killing Epstein while saying "Breathe, Epstein, breathe," and like pretending to resuscitate him while strangling him. I'm not saying that is the case, but it's something to consider.
And when we're talking about a billionaire with incredibly powerful connections, a powerful network of people, it's very well possible that could have happened. We really don't know in a lot of ways, but to say that something like that is a statement that's far-fetched, I would disagree with. I don't think it is far-fetched.
I actually think that there's actually more information to suggest that, not that this is the case, but that it's at least plausible, and things that back up Tartaglioni's claims that he has damaging information on him, leading to the guards threatening him. So, for example, a civil rights attorney has also filed numerous lawsuits against the conditions of the prison in which Epstein was being held, including extreme brutality from the guards. In one case, an inmate was beaten to death by the guards, who tried to cover up their actions by claiming the man had overdosed. Epstein, I mean, that's, first of all, before we continue.
Overdosed inside a jail.
Yeah, overdosed. So first of all, I mean, that's not technically impossible. I'm sure that there are ways to get drugs and contraband inside of prisons. It happens.
Sure.
People sneak things in.
Often through the guards,
yes,
actually.
But for them to cover up their beating to death of an inmate by claiming he overdosed, that's just... I have no words.
There's not much to say there, right? It is exactly what it sounds like. And so now we have very clear evidence. I mean, inarguably accurate evidence to show that this man was able to, when he was caught the first time, leverage his power and his connections to get out of what should have probably been a life sentence, or at least numerous years sentenced to jail. The man was able to get the most posh of treatments in a jail you could ever hope for, 12 hours outside of his jail cell, as you'd mentioned, spending, 13 months in jail, and really only half of that time inside. So, essentially, he had a bed in jail, and anything else he wanted to do, he could leave. Adding on to that, the fact that he also had his own security detail, what we're seeing there is a clear example of corruption and bias at the highest level, at the judicial level, and then also to say that there were corrupt factors or highly questionable factors involved here, even at the lowest level when we're talking about the guards that were placed here. So again, though this is considered conspiratorial, I think at this point, and really the consensus from the internet as well, is that it's more of a conspiracy at this point to believe the official story than it is to...
It's far too suspicious.
Far too suspicious.
Yeah, and I think if you were a reasonable person and you had access to all of this information, you would easily question any official story about his supposed suicide. And actually, back to the claims that he had committed suicide, it was reported that Epstein was in very good spirits, and he had consistent meetings with his lawyers to, in fact, he abused a rule allowing him to stay out of his cell, sometimes for 12 hours at a time, as long as he was meeting with his lawyers. And Epstein was also confident that he could succeed legally with his 2008 sweetheart deal conviction as the key to his defense strategy, believing that he could win a double jeopardy motion. So there isn't any evidence to suggest that he committed suicide out of some depression or belief that he was going to be in prison for the rest of his life. Quite the opposite. According to all reports, he was very confident that he was going to get away with this.
And, I mean, just to build on top of that as well, anyone who's knowledgeable on his past situation would probably have the same confidence that he's probably going to get less than he deserves. As far as the punishment or involved, he did the first time around, and quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to get away with that the second time. Outraged, yes, but surprised, no.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Epstein certainly believed that he would, and I'm sure his lawyers also believed that they would. I mean, essentially, he was planning on using a double jeopardy defense, which basically means that he was going to claim that because he had been convicted in 2008 that they couldn't convict him again for the same crime now. And so if he believed that would work, then it's very reasonable that he would have been able to walk away from these charges, which again makes it highly unlikely that he would commit suicide if he genuinely believed that he was going to be a free man.
One small detail I also want to add to this is that anyone who, let's assume that you do believe the official story, why wouldn't you want a continued investigation on the other people he could have been connected to, the other people involved with all this? I could see absolutely no good reason, even if you believed everything that is disclosed within the official story, that there was nothing deeper to look into here, that we shouldn't be investigating into a larger human trafficking ring that is definitely, and I can honestly say that, definitely involved in this. You don't, the man has an island, and I'm assuming, and this is his own private island. It's not like the people that he was sexually assaulting lived there necessarily. We're seeing a systematic assault of children.
Yeah.
And anyone who believes the official story believes that there's a network involved here.
Well, there is a lot of pedophilia in the upper echelons of society, and Hollywood has big problems with this as well. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the casting couch, child stars being groomed and molested by very powerful people. Child trafficking is something that happens all over the world, and it happens in our country too. And an investigation into someone like Jeffrey Epstein is absolutely necessary in order for us to get to the bottom of who exactly is involved in this and how it's being done. Because this is one of the greatest injustices that is being committed, and we have been, as a society, letting it slide for far too long.
Yeah, the moral failings of a society lead to the moral failings of a structure of a government. And quite frankly, the moral failing of the government in this regard is a direct result of the moral failings of individuals who are not willing to voice their concern about this issue.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I mean, I think we can agree that's one of our big goals specifically with today's podcast, is to raise awareness regarding this issue.
Yes.
Because the news media won't do it. You know,
and we'll get into
mainstream
why
media
soon.
is not doing it. Yeah.
So for now, though, continuing with all of the mysteries around Epstein's death, several weeks ago, it was reported that guards at the time of Epstein's death had rejected a plea deal that would require them to admit to falsifying prison records. And the existence of a plea deal indicates that the Justice Department is considering criminal charges, which is a good thing. But then, more recently, two of the guards that were on duty during Epstein's suicide were arrested by the FBI for failing to check on Epstein every 30 minutes as they were supposed to do, despite the fact that they were stationed 15 feet away from his cell. Epstein's cell was the closest cell to them and the easiest for them to check on, and they still failed in their duties. And instead, they were supposedly browsing online or sleeping. So either negligence or, well, they didn't do their duty on purpose.
Now, I also want to point out one thing is that this would not be the first time within a major investigation that we've seen a potential suspect use, I don't want to use the word stupidity, but almost negligence would be the better word, essentially using a guise of negligence to hide intentions.
Yes.
Clear intentions. So
and proving intent isn't easy either.
Exactly. So the lines do become a little blurred here, but even that is very suspicious in the way that it's being done.
Mm-hmm. And also, the guards were also accused of fabricating log entries that showed they were checking on Epstein when in fact they were not. So this is why they were offered a plea deal in regards to that would require them to admit to fudging records, because what they were doing was they were writing down in their logs that they were checking on Epstein, but they weren't doing anything. They were just sitting there writing it in and not actually doing their job. So this is more this leads me to believe more on the side of negligence in regards to what these guards in particular were up to. It seemed more to me like they were lazy, and I mean, it's also possible that they were corrupt. They might have been involved in some sort of conspiracy to kill him. But if this was something that was consistent, it's much more likely that they simply didn't want to do their job. At least that's my opinion.
Right. And respectfully, I might even disagree there to some degree, because he didn't end up in this prison by mistake, is what I'm saying, kind of. And we're looking at the same piece of evidence. We can come up with slightly varied conclusion, and that's quite all right. But I definitely think that there is something suspicious about the fact that he was placed in this facility in the first place.
Yes, I agree with that, especially given all the civil rights violations that this prison is known for.
So given the fact that this is it's, maybe you've seen this type of cliche on TV or something like that before, but a police officer will be trying to get a conviction out of a criminal, and perhaps they're a high-ranking criminal, and so there'll be a dispute as to which prison they get sent to, and if they cooperate, then they're more likely to get sent to a place where they won't be, for example, in general population, where they might feel like they're more at risk. So leverage over where an inmate is going to stay has been used in investigations many times before this. Mm-hmm. So again, the fact that he's ended up in this facility in the first place, personally, I find that highly suspicious.
As do I. And now we've gone over a lot of the let's say inconsistencies regarding stories, corruption in the prison. Now let's talk a little bit about Epstein himself and the connections that he had and why it's so suspicious that things happened the way that they did. Because as a result of the investigation into Epstein, his little black book was leaked to the internet, and it revealed his connections with hundreds upon hundreds of presidents, prime ministers, celebrities from all over the world. People in the US and the UK, Asia, Africa, everywhere. Anywhere, any country you can think of, this guy knows powerful people there.
So again, if you didn't believe there was a huge network of people involved here, even more evidence to support that claim.
Yes. And also, flight logs show, as Vishal alluded to previously, that former President of the United States, Bill Clinton, flew to Jeffrey Epstein's private island 26 times. Again, 26 times is a lot.
And correct me if I'm wrong. In fact, double check this if you'd like, but I believe the flight logs were specific to the Lolita Express. And
yes.
that there is evidence to show that he not only was on Epstein's plane, which, by the way, is named after a sexual assault victim. Mm-hmm. Like Lolita.
I should point out that that's a nickname for the plane. Epstein didn't name that himself. That would be extremely stupid of him.
Right, but it's just kind of odd that it got the name in the first place.
Yes, and it was given that name by the locals near his island, probably because they had observed that he was bringing lots of underage girls to his island on this plane.
Which would also support the claim that there is a large network behind this, specifically a human trafficking ring, and that the need for a larger investigation is absolutely paramount to the outcome of this. I mean, we need an investigation.
Yeah.
And the fact that
we need an investigation not just into Epstein, but also into Ghislaine Maxwell, who is a longtime girlfriend of his, and also someone who, she had attended Chelsea Clinton's wedding, and is supposedly the one that brought Bill Clinton to Jeffrey Epstein using connections that had been built by her father being a billionaire media baron, Robert Maxwell, an owner of several British tabloids, who by the end of his life was in severe financial debt. And in a New York Post profile on Ghislaine Maxwell, it was implied that she had used her relationship with Epstein to guarantee her financial prospects, given the massive amounts of debt that had been left to her after her father's death.
And of course, the nature of Epstein's work, essentially being someone who loaned money. And
has been described as a high-profile bounty hunter, essentially collecting money that was owed to very rich people, very large amounts of money, millions or billions of dollars. Epstein would track down this money and bring it to them for a price, of course, and this resulted in him obtaining massive amounts of wealth and also leverage over very powerful people, which I'm sure he used to his advantage as well. So going back into Ghislaine Maxwell, because she's still alive and she's still out there, and she is very deeply involved in all of this. She also acted as a personal assistant to Epstein, who organized much of his social life, and this allegedly extended to procuring young girls for Epstein, and is claimed in multiple civil suits against Epstein and his associates, including celebrity lawyer Alan Dershowitz and Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. So,
yes, that was Prince Andrew.
yes.
I don't think it's really possible for me to stress the severity of the situation. I don't think that there's any pretty way for me to stress how important all this is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let you continue because, quite frankly, I could go on and on about this, but
let's just get it all out there. And then,
let's get it all out there because, quite frankly, it does get worse.
It does. So, in a defamation lawsuit, a woman testified about orders she had received from Ghislaine Maxwell to have sex with New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, financier Glenn Dubin, model scout Jean-Luc Brunel, former Senator George Mitchell, and was lent out to, again, Prince Andrew. And then several weeks ago, a video from ABC News. Again, ABC News, the people who first broke the story of Epstein's death and claimed it was a suicide before anyone else. There was a released video by Project Veritas showing Amy Robach, a news anchor on ABC News, stating that she had the story of Epstein for 3 years, including an interview with Virginia Roberts, the woman who had testified about her involvement with Prince Andrew, among others. So she was told by ABC News that they would not put it on air because no one knew who Jeffrey Epstein was and that it was a stupid story. Despite
the fact that nearly 10 years, this was 3 years ago, then we're really talking about, 7 years before this story would have broken had ABC moved forward in doing so. This was the same man that was caught on similar charges 7 years before this. Yes, people knew who he was.
Yeah. And even if they didn't, why would that be an argument for not doing the story? I mean, this is clearly a very high profile case, and if these news channels, if these news sites and papers actually cared about truth and justice, they would have covered this story regardless. I mean, I think it would have been an interesting story even if no one knew who Jeffrey Epstein was, especially given all of the connections that he has. I am genuinely baffled by how ABC could possibly think that is an adequate justification for burying this story.
And of course, that within and of itself is very suspicious.
Yeah, but I guess
we mentioned Epstein has vast connections. And, if he's got connections to world leaders, presidents, government officials, religious leaders, why wouldn't he have connections to
media
moguls?
Especially given that Ghislaine Maxwell's father was a media baron himself.
100%, yeah.
So, again, and also Ghislaine Maxwell is British, I should add. And, this actually matters because it could potentially explain the connection to Prince Andrew. And again, in regards to ABC, another reason why the story was buried, or supposedly another reason why it was buried, is because the British royal family found out about the allegations toward Prince Andrew and threatened ABC News in, quote, 1 million different ways, unquote. And this made the networks so afraid that they would not be able to interview Will and Kate that they quashed the story.
Now, just to be clear,
they feared not being able to get an interview with a new royal couple so much that they killed a story that could potentially expose a sex trafficking ring. In other words, ABC News cared more about getting a story about a marriage that, frankly, I could care less about. I've never understood the fascination with the royal wedding. I know that there are lots of people that care about it. I'm much more concerned with justice for children who are being abused than I do about that. And the fact that ABC News doesn't is beyond disappointing. I mean, disappointing is putting it lightly.
If there was one moment where ABC lost absolutely any semblance of respect from me, and I'll speak for myself here, this was it. I don't think I could look any of the people responsible for this in the eyes without wanting to spit in their face. And there is no way to sugarcoat that or to color that nicely. Those people are horrible people. They're horrible people. And if ever in society we've had the opportunity to say, hey, that person is verifiably terrible and we should all disassociate with them, And if we're not going to throw them into jail, then we'd at least like to make sure that they never get our money ever again, that we never support them. This is one of those cases. We should be boycotting ABC. But quite frankly, there are many things to this that need to be done. I want to point out one additional tidbit regarding the journalist that had been videotaped discussing this. So that quote, "a million different ways," that was from her. Mm-hmm. So she on camera said that they would have been threatened a million different ways. They're not the first people to have ever claimed that they would have been threatened by the royal family, or for that matter by a major political leader within the United States or elsewhere. And she also on camera said that she believed 100% that Epstein was not, that did not commit suicide, that he was murdered. And that she said this herself on camera, that she believed that this was true 100%. Now, again, it was, she didn't know she was being videotaped, I imagine. Yeah. So this wasn't on air. That's something to be very clear about. Typically, I'm not someone who's very much in support of people being videotaped against without their consent, without their knowledge.
I will say, however, that because she believed that she wasn't on air, it's probably likely that these are her honest opinions.
100%. 100%. I'd like to also add that her witness, that she claimed, or that her witness had told to her, and that this is exactly what she says, that her witness had videos, pictures. I don't know if she said videos specifically. I might redact that, but I know she said that there was photographic evidence and records.
She said that they had everything.
That they had everything. And to quote her, she said we had everything. So you could even tell that she was notably disappointed in the fact that the story had been shut down, notably frustrated.
I don't want to disparage the reporter herself too much, because I'm sure that's a difficult position to be in, but I can only imagine what it would be like to have all of that information and then to have it squashed by your higher ups. I mean,
right.
If you're the type of person that cares about these things, I'm sure that she could have tried to get that information out there somewhere. She may have been putting herself at risk, but I mean, these are I couldn't imagine finding myself in that position with that much information and not still trying to get it out somehow,
Well, put it this way, is if that were any of us, you would have lost many, many nights of sleep over it. And if you didn't, then something's wrong with you. And so I suppose that's kind of where I draw my line on the journalist. If I would hope, and this is kind of a strange statement, but I would hope that this is something that hurt her deeply to the point that it did legitimately make it harder for her to do her daily routine. Because if it didn't, then what would? What would be so heinous that a honest, fair journalist would lose sleep over it? So I definitely to that capacity, I actually feel bad for her in a shred of a light. I imagine this. She has the weight of the world on her shoulders in a lot of ways. Her choices are her choices. Quite frankly, had she decided to oust this information earlier, we don't know how many thousands of children might have been saved from a horrible fate. We literally don't know. That's the thing, and that's why we need this investigation. We don't know how many children were on this island, but we know it's an island. This is a private island we're talking about, and the idea that there isn't anything deeper here to this is still such a mockery to the idea of justice.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who is claiming that there is nothing more to this story, I think, is either ignorant of all of the facts, or they're part of the cover-up. I mean, honestly, I can't put it any other way. I don't know why, with knowing all of this, you could possibly buy the official story.
And you and I, we're the type of people who, we haven't necessarily been huge on outrage politics. We think that, or at least, and again, I'll speak for myself in this, right? But I do think that having a clear-headed discussion about ideas is the best way to address issues, to find solutions.
To think things through.
And that often when emotions fly, and get heated, that people are unable to cooperate. There are many reasons I can say that it's important to keep a cool head about issues. But even me, I mean, I can't talk about this without having my ears get hot. You know, I can't. And maybe that just means, maybe that's how I know that maybe I'm a decent guy. You know, maybe.
I mean, I don't think anyone who has any humanity wouldn't be outraged by a story like this, especially when you consider that these are underage children that are being sexually abused and trafficked and sold, that are being put into situations that, because they are children, they have no way of getting out of themselves. And I mean, you would have thought that this is something, I mean, it seems to be one of those things where the left and right seem to be coming together a little bit. You know, I will say a lot of people on the left try to make it seem like this is a Trump issue, and some people on the right try to make this seem like this is a Bill Clinton issue. This is an issue everyone should be able to get behind. And that if you care about children, which hopefully represents everybody, right? If you care about children, you should care about this issue. Yeah. And you know, like I said, I've never been one to be adamant or fast to say we need to be outraged, but quite frankly, I'm pretty outraged. I agree, but continuing with the Prince Andrew line, because I believe that there is a deep connection here. Recently, Prince Andrew gave an interview where he admitted to having traveled on Epstein's private plane, nicknamed the Lolita Express, and admitted to having been to Epstein's private island. And then, when asked why he stayed with Epstein at his mansion in New York in 2010, which was after his conviction and release, Prince Andrew responded by saying he only visited Epstein to tell him that they could not be seen together, and also stated that he believed doing so through phone call would be the chicken's way out. Now, I personally find this to be ridiculous. You know, Prince Andrew claims that he was being too honorable. Frankly, those are his words, too honorable. Yeah, it's such a nonsense of an excuse. If you really didn't want to be seen with this man, you wouldn't have flown and stayed for several days at his mansion to tell him that you couldn't be seen with him. That is absurd. And his excuse for that is that it was an inconvenient place to stay. You're one of the richest people in the world. You couldn't buy a hotel. I mean, yeah, he's a prince. What, he couldn't have somebody else send a message for? Apparently, a phone call would have been the chicken's way out. And he's too honorable for that. Yeah. So a phone call wouldn't have sufficed to tell a pedophile that you can no longer associate with him. No, instead we're going to stay at his home for the next week, and then what? And then pretend that we've broken connections? Is that how that works? That's how he thinks it works, or at least that's what he wants us to think. You need to break bad news to somebody, so you know, stay at their home for. I mean, could you imagine this is somebody trying to break up with a spouse in a bad relationship, like break up with a bad girlfriend or bad boyfriend? That's like terribly abusive to you. That's a situation where breakup sex happens for a week. Yeah. At his mansion. And who knows? Maybe breakup sex did happen, just not with each other. Well, quite frankly, and we're being a little bombastic here, but I will say that there's some validity to what you're saying. I mean, what good reason is there to stay at a pedophile's mansion for a week after he's been convicted to be able to say that you can't hang out there anymore, or to it just seems like an addict trying to get their last fix, going on an 8-day binge. Yeah. And by the way, I'm going to continue talking about this interview, but I would highly recommend that if you are interested in this, that you actually watch the interview yourself, because you can see it in his body language, the answers he gives, the way he words things. He's lying, and it's so clear that he's lying, and his excuses are frankly pathetic. Pathetic. Yeah. But hey, at least he brought honor to the royal family, because that's what we need in 2019 is royalty. Oh, man. Yeah. So then, anyways, going on with the interview, when he was asked about the allegation against him that he had sex with Virginia Roberts, Prince Andrew said that he had no recollection of ever meeting her, but says that he remembers taking his children out for pizza the day that he was supposedly with her in 2001. So he specifically remembers being with his children and going out to a specific pizza place 18 years ago, but he doesn't remember ever meeting this woman. He has no recollection, but he can recall pizza. And he says that the reason he can recall that is because he doesn't get pizza that often. I mean, I don't eat...
I just see something very, very convoluted within that. And I mean, look, allow me to get a little conspiratorial for a second. Because, again, I said it out loud, right? I'm being conspiratorial. This is, right here, I'm drawing the lines. This is where I think the conspiracy is.
Okay.
And in 2 words, Pizzagate.
Oh.
I don't have pizza often. I remember taking my kids for us to get pizza. Multiple pizza stores in Washington being implicated in Pizzagate. Very, very, very suspicious phone calls, recordings found. There's a lot behind Pizzagate. And again, now we're getting into the realm of conspiratorial things, right?
Yes, this is none of this can be confirmed.
Right, neither of us can sign off on the validity of Pizzagate, but
it is possible that pizza is code for something. Although why he would use that in an interview in which he's trying to exonerate himself is a little bit suspect.
Well, I mean, why he'd create a terrible, why he have a terrible alibi for the aftermath of him sexually assaulting kids is also, pretty ridiculous. I mean,
You'd think they would be better liars, though.
You would think they'd be better liars or better at covering these things up. But it seems that their only goal is to get away with it and move on and hope people forget. And unfortunately, in our society today, a lot of people are willing to forget, move on with their lives.
And this is something we absolutely cannot forget about, which is one of the reasons why I'm so happy that the Epstein meme is so prevalent, because it's keeping it right there in everyone's face. Epstein didn't kill himself.
And however many years it may be from now, hopefully it's not a full year. Hopefully we find out as much as we can as soon as possible. But eventually, when evidence does come out to implicate more and more people in this, and the world cries, how could we let this happen? We'll be here saying, well, this is how you let it happen. And many of us online will remember posting that meme, and I think that's when a lot of this will hit us like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
But hopefully that time comes sooner than later.
Yeah. And furthermore, I should add that this woman, Virginia Roberts, according to Amy Robach, the reporter that interviewed her, this Virginia had been in hiding for 12 years, but was convinced by ABC to come out for an interview that they never aired. And also, like you alluded to before, she says that she had pictures. So supposedly she has photographic evidence of these things happening. Now, I would love for that to be made public, because if it's true, then it would absolutely blow up Prince Andrew's entire defense here. And
additionally, I gotta feel terrible for Virginia Roberts right now, because not only did she do one of the most one of the most difficult and brave things that a victim of sexual assault can do, which is to come out and try to prevent that from ever happening again.
Especially to come out against one of the most powerful and connected people on the planet.
Especially within this context, yes. Especially within this context. And for ABC to not publish the story is incredibly...
After convincing her to come out of hiding for 12 years.
And so there's another factor. Not only is it incredibly shameful on ABC's part, the fact that they shut down the story, but this woman had to go into hiding for 12 years. And
it's over half of my life.
And nobody does that for fun.
Yeah.
Nobody goes into hiding because they want to. This woman, when you're going into hiding, you're essentially making sure as few people know you as possible. And that directly entails that you don't make friends, people don't know you, you don't make connections, you make huge sacrifices to do such a thing. For her to come out and speak to a major news channel like ABC and try to bring this information out, only to have everything flipped on her.
Mm-hmm.
And then now wherever she is, hopefully somewhere safe, to know that prominent people are going to be trying to track her down and
suicide her
and Epstein her.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they'll call it. That's what it'll be called in the future. Epsteining.
You got Epstein.
You got Epstein.
We really should make that a thing.
We should make that a thing.
Not for the comedic effect, although I do think it is somewhat funny, but rather because, again, we need to not forget that this happened. We need to keep it on everyone's mind. And so little things like this do matter.
Yeah, I never forget this.
Mm-hmm.
And damned if we do.
Mm.
Because, and like I said earlier, these people are sloppy. And the evidence is right there in front of us. And the only thing that is stopping real action from being had and taking place is the people. Because we are all
we have
way
the power
too
to
busy.
do something about this.
Absolutely. And we also have the power to continue our own lives and just do whatever we've been doing and ignore it. And if we choose to ignore it now, then, God help us.
Yeah.
With that,
Yeah, so going further with Amy Robach, so you mentioned this also before, that she had believed Epstein killed himself. She also said that he made his whole living blackmailing people, and that his longtime girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell knows everything, and she's been accused of procuring girls for him before, so it's very likely that she knows everything. And again, she's still a free woman walking around, so she absolutely needs to be investigated.
Continuing to do exactly what she's been doing, most likely, with the protection of powerful people. Quite frankly, yeah. Yeah,
so, following the release of the video of Amy Robach talking about how ABC had covered up the story, ABC News launched an investigation to find out who had leaked the footage of Amy and tracked it back to someone who had worked at ABC but had changed jobs and was then employed at CBS, a woman named Ashley Bianco. And once ABC informed CBS, a competitor of theirs, CBS then fired Ashley Bianco after being informed that she was the one who had leaked the footage to Project Veritas. However, Ashley denies ever having leaked anything. She said that she had access to footage, but that many other people had accessed it, and that it was a hot topic in the studio when it had happened. And also James O'Keefe, the founder of Project Veritas, confirmed that Ashley was not the one who leaked the video to them. Then several weeks ago, it was revealed that ABC has been searching emails and pressuring colleagues to turn against each other in an effort to learn the identity of the leakers. So not only had ABC covered up the story about Epstein, after convincing a woman who had suffered sexual abuse, who had gone into hiding for 12 years, that they pulled out for an interview. After doing all of that and then burying the story and then being exposed for it, they started investigating and trying to find the person who exposed it, and then fired an innocent woman. Meanwhile, they protected one of the highest class pedophiles in the world because potentially they were afraid they wouldn't have been able to interview a royal couple.
But Mike, what about the royal wedding? And what about, come on, lots of money to be made there, right? Yeah. Lots of ad revenue
and this just goes to show, though, that ABC only cares about covering themselves.
Yeah, anytime I hear the media say that they speak for the people, I laugh. And cringe at the same time, too. I get a bit nauseous, but I laugh. Because it's just a totally false narrative that they've been trying to pander and hold for many years now.
Yeah.
But, I want to touch on one of the facts that you had pointed out here, which is that, so this person who was alleged to have leaked the video by ABC, who was working at, was it CBS at the time?
Yes.
Right? So now, and I want to make sure I read this exactly. It was that this video and this whole entire thing had actually caused quite a commotion in the was it ABC or within CBS?
It was within it was within ABC. It's where it happened.
So there was a commotion within people working at ABC who all had access to the video, and that she is claiming that multiple people at ABC had access to the video, understood that it was controversial.
Yes. And shared it with each other.
Yes. But nobody else. So, okay, so I mean, if that's true, we're looking at a situation in which ABC and multiple people working there. I mean,
yeah, and another thing I'd like to,
level at the executive level that shut the story down, and people at the lower level who are the boots on the ground, so to speak. That there's such a corruption at both levels there, that the people at the lowest level were willing to let the video slide and didn't leak it and didn't, I mean, one of them eventually did. So, take that statement for what you will, but what that would imply is that we're seeing corruption at the highest and lowest levels.
But also something I'd like to point out is that I find it very strange that CBS would fire one of their employees at the behest of ABC, given that ABC and CBS are supposed to be competitors to one another.
Exactly.
And the only possible reason I could think that CBS would do this is if they feared that she was a leaker and someone who would possibly air out CBS's own dirty laundry, that things that they might be covering up, and that they didn't 100%. Want to put themselves at risk for that.
100%. I think that makes more sense than any other possible conclusion. So, I mean, if you look at this like any other two employers, and by the way, I just want to point out one thing. Initially, we had planned on doing the Epstein case as well as transgender issues. I'm looking at the time right now.
Yes,
it's 9 o'clock, so we've been on this specific topic for about an hour.
Yeah, this is, we're probably going to have to make an episode just about this, but honestly, I'm okay with that.
I'm quite fine with that, too. Yeah. I think this is a very well-deserving topic. But,
yes.
I digress, I suppose, to some. There is so much to be said here, but even more to be done. And I suppose a few good places to start. And there is more information we're going to cover as well, but something I just feel the need to point out. Number one is awareness. People need to know what happened. Knowledge is power. And
don't let them hide this from you.
Don't let
it's all out there. If you really want to find it, you can find all the information that we found. There's plenty of it.
And I mean, this is, taking care of this specific situation, investigating into this, it could quite possibly be one of the most important tasks that many people in our generation take on. I mean,
frankly, this is something we should be contacting our congressman about.
Absolutely.
And I would urge anyone watching this to do so.
Absolutely. In fact, I mean, we had even considered, just between discussions among ourselves, we talked about
potentially starting a petition. On the White House website, because if a petition on the whitehouse.gov gets a certain amount of signatures, then they have to address it. So whether or not that would result in anything is questionable, but at the very least, it would require them to make a statement, and that statement itself could be very telling.
Yeah, gone is the day where you can simply, put up a tweet and then that's it. People need to be moving forward with petitions. People, honestly, I'm not the type of person who likes to tell people to go protest in the streets, but there are many worthwhile issues to protest about.
This is definitely one of them.
This is something that public support is paramount to. And again, this is for the children. I mean, I hate to be the guy to say that it's for the I guess it's a
cliche a little bit.
It's a trope, right? It's a cliche that people will say, "We'll do it for the children. Do it for the children." This is something you can actually do for the children, and that if you don't have awareness towards this issue, what good are we really doing for the children as a society?
And if we allow these people to get away with it, what does that say about our justice system? Do we really have a justice system if powerful people are not only allowed to get away with trafficking children, but when any one of them is potentially going to be exposed, that they can just off them and get away with that too.
And then, I mean, if you don't believe that this is something that, I mean, imagine this is one of your children. Imagine that this is one of your own, your sister, your brother, your child, your cousin, anyone, or even yourself. And what, are you going to live the rest of your life just trying to pretend like that didn't happen? And expect the rest of the world to not do anything? I mean, think about how sad of a reality that is. To live in a world where this has happened to you and that the world does nothing about it.
That's why we all have to stand together in times like this.
If my blood wasn't boiling, I'd shed a tear for it. But that will be saved for victory. Tears will be shed when we can shed them out of joy for a solution we've brought. This needs to get fixed. This is, and then what the media wants to focus on, impeachment, or a claim that Donald Trump, for example, was playing golf on his Thanksgiving break while he's in Afghanistan with his troops.
The same media that would cover up stories like this.
Same media.
Post trivial nonsense that doesn't matter.
The same media that will lie about kids at a high school at a national monument harassing people. The same media that was so quick to support Jussie Smollett. The same media that has consistently lied to us and manipulated us. The same media that's tried to convince us that assault weapons are legal. The same media I can go on and on. But at the top of my list should be this. And quite frankly, I think it should be at the top of yours. I want to point out one thing before I do forget to, which is that if what the alleged leaker is saying is true, then ABC, then we're essentially seeing a situation where the media just straight up can't be trusted. And additionally,
if it wasn't clear before, it should be abundantly clear now that they cannot be trusted.
In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that you have no excuse to believe otherwise. Excuse is the specific word I choose to use. People want to believe that the world is perfect, or that the world is good enough, that they don't need to do anything, that their part in it isn't important. And the belief that their part isn't important is what allows them to...
It's what allows people like this to get away with these things.
As well as what allows the average person to sleep at night, thinking that there's nothing they could have done. Well, what if, like I said, it's your own? Then is there something you could have done? And if there isn't, it's because you turned your back on the people that you should have helped. And look, I'm not perfect, and I suppose neither of us are perfect, but hell, we're trying to do what we can. And if what we're seeing here implies what it does, and that CBS fired her because of this claim, then one of maybe two, maybe three things could be, deduced to be true, right? It's a limited number of things. One deduction could be made, and you can verify my argument by looking at parallels when you see, let's say, one person working for one car company going to another car company. And if something regarding their record when they worked at the first company was released, it is possible the second one will fire them. Possible.
Right.
But under some very specific circumstances, you believe that person was bad at their practice, that they made a mistake at their practice, and you don't want to trust them making the same mistake at your company. So maybe that's one reason, but that's not the case here from what we can tell, because everything that was reported on or leaked was accurate.
Yes, and I would like to continue along that line, but I would also like to say that while a lot of this it can be very depressing to hear stories like this, to see the injustices that are committed, but there are good things that are coming out of this, and I would like to end on a positive note. And going along the lines that we were talking about before as to this woman, it's very likely that she in fact is not the leaker, and actually the leaker wrote a letter that was published by Project Veritas, and I'd like to read that letter because I think it's something that we should all hear.
If I may, just because I pointed out one of the three conclusions, potentially two or three, I just want to point out the others, just because I did discuss how this could actually be verified when you look at it in any other industry, in any other field. The second reason would be that they believe that CBS believes that that this alleged leaker will whistleblow, so to speak, in the same regard that they did at ABC, which is to imply that CBS has something that is being done that justifies a whistle being blown, right? And I mean, if there's a third conclusion here, perhaps I haven't thought of it exactly. Looking at this like from an empirical I think that there's actually a third conclusion to this, but the finger seems to consistently point back to CBS having no good reason to fire her, and if they did have a quote good reason to fire her,
but not only that,
then it was underlined.
Not only did they not have a good reason to fire her, but if she wasn't even the leaker, they absolutely didn't have a good reason to fire her, and did so without confirming whether or not she had ever done this.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that this letter that was written by the leaker is so important, and why I would like to read it now. And it's...
Oh, I'm sorry, the third conclusion, I'm very sorry, real quick, means that the methodology that ABC is using is exactly the same at CBS, and that
they just took ABC's word for it.
They took their competitor's word for it, which means that they actually have some type of mutual interest.
I wonder if this is a violation of antitrust law. You know, there might be a case for that.
That is a very good point. Yeah. I mean, so that having been said, those were my 10 cents, and you were going to continue.
The letter, and I think that this is a very important letter. So it starts
by Project Veritas.
Yes, by the leaker, published by Project Veritas, and he says, "To my fellow man, I came forward with this information bearing no motives other than to have this information public. I did not and do not seek any personal gain from this information, whether it be financial or otherwise, and will always decline. When I became aware of this moment, I had the same reaction as many of you did: anger, confusion, and sadness. I care not about petty political quarrels, and only hope for the best in all of us. To my fellow ABC News employees, I've walked the halls experiencing similar feelings we are all having right now. All of you, regardless of your own personal differences in one form or another, do an outstanding job. I sincerely enjoy working with each and every one of you, and will continue to do so throughout our careers. To those wrongfully accused, it is terrible that you have been lashed out at by the company. I know some may put the burden of guilt on me, but my conscience is clear. The actions of the company towards you are the result of their own, and not anyone else. The public outcry from coast to coast of all people, creeds, and political affiliations is clear. I have not one doubt that there will always be support for you, and you will have prosperous careers. For neither you nor I have done anything wrong. To Amy Roback, you are the only person deserving of an apology. I am most certainly sorry, not for my actions, or for this to center around you, but for what it is clear to have happened. When I first stumbled across this, my initial reaction was outrage, but this soon turned towards empathy. I cannot imagine doing all the hard work to only have it shelved. If the past few years have taught us anything, it is the truth that some of us have endured many hardships in this industry, from the spiking of stories regarding prominent and powerful people in this world, and to yours. I believe you are an outstanding reporter, and have done such tremendous work in the community as well. To ABC News, I sit right here with you all in complete shock. I, like many, are at a loss for words on how this has been handled. Instead of addressing this head-on like the company has in the past, it has spun into a mission of seek and destroy. Innocent people that have absolutely nothing to do with this are being hunted down as if we are all a sport. I challenge all of you to actually look inwards and remember why this company engages in journalism. We all hold the First Amendment at the foundation of this company, yet forget its history, its purpose, and its reasoning for even coming into existence to begin with. How lost we are, yearning to be found. I went to Project Veritas for the sole reason that any other media outlet else would have probably shelved this as well. I thank all of them and James for seeking truth. We are all human and mortal, creatures of mistakes and redemption. The road to redemption favors no soul. Sincerely, Ignotus. His pseudonym, the Latin word for unknown. So, that is a very powerful statement, by this man, and frankly, I think this man is a hero. And supposedly, he's also still working at ABC News. So,
if there's I call this person a hero in my book, quite frankly.
yeah.
You know.
And despite ABC News's attempts, supposedly he is still working there. So hopefully, he will continue to be a pillar of truth that our media lacks. And I hope that I hope they don't find him, because we need people like this to hold our media sources accountable.
Yeah, people who, like he said, or she, understands the true value of the First Amendment and the responsibility that our media holds and the power that they hold in exposing the truth and showing support for the pursuit of justice. I think that's the purpose. Hopefully that's a purpose that we've carried out today in the best capacity we could have. You know, and of course we intend to keep bringing content of this nature to you. It's a heavy topic.
It is.
And
I think
you said, it's not all dark.
Yes,
right?
there is a light at the end of the
hope to
tunnel.
this, right.
And furthermore, another piece of good news, Kevin McCarthy, a Republican representative from California, has recently launched an inquiry into ABC over the Epstein cover-up and has vowed to push for hearings should they refuse to cooperate. So their cover-up is being investigated. Like I said before, I think that there may be an antitrust case against ABC and CBS. I think that should be something that's looked into.
Yeah.
And furthermore, the guards that were working at the prison are being investigated. So, you know, we may get more information and we may get a some semblance of justice. But there are still many powerful people out there that are connected, and we can only hope that these connections will be brought to light by these investigations.
I suppose to conclude, right? I mean, at this, I feel like all of the evidence has really been discussed. Everything that we could have possibly, discussed regarding the direct information regarding this case has been said. A society is only as just, can only be as just as the people living within it will make it. So it is incumbent on us, every single one of us, to pursue a safer and more just society. And if we don't, then we unfortunately can say nothing to a society that is unjust. And we can say that we've done nothing to make it better.
Yeah.
So we
and
need
there
to
are
do
things
our
we
part.
can do. There are things we can do, each and every
And
one of us.
Let's go into that a
we-
little bit, because I think we
first
both
of all,
want to leave on some type of positive. There's a lot that can be done here.
Yeah, well, raising awareness is one thing. You know, sharing this video, sharing information, talking about it to everyone you know, making sure no one forgets this. Like I said before, you know, the memes are more than just memes. It's more than just a joke. Constantly reminding people that Epstein didn't kill himself. Constantly keeping people aware of the state of our justice system. Furthermore, follow these stories as they continue developing. Follow these investigations. Stay informed as to what comes to light and who's involved in this. Stay skeptical of these media sources that will cover up these stories and spread disinformation. Make sure that you do your own research whenever you see a news story, because these people will lie to you and they will hide the truth from you. Now, I would also urge everyone to contact their congressman. This congressman from California is the person who is launching this inquiry into ABC. We have lawmakers who we voted in. These people are accountable to us, and we need to ensure that they are upholding the law, that they are upholding justice. And so contacting them and making sure that they know that we will refuse to vote for them if they don't get to the bottom of this is something that each and every one of us can do. And then furthermore, I wish that we had a petition ready for everyone to sign. But like I said before, a potential petition to the White House, I think, is something that would be very important, that would force them to at least address it. Like I said before, we don't have any guarantee that if we made this petition, the White House would actually do something. But if they didn't, they would have to explain why. And that explanation itself could be very telling and could show us how deep this rabbit hole goes.
So furthermore, I just want to let you guys know, as far as our channel, YouTube does de-rank independent commentary. So if this is something that you've enjoyed or feel is important and that you want to support, please like, subscribe, and also hit the notification bell so you can be informed when we make new videos. We intend to release a video every Sunday, Eastern Standard Time at 8 o'clock. So
8 p.m.
Please tune in. It'll be live. And we typically also set aside time for there to be questions asked about, quite frankly, anything you guys have questions about. The feedback is incredibly important, and we need to know people are engaged in this topic. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'd love to see you next time.
Yep, and this has been the Renaissance Men podcast. Again, I'm Michael Perilla.
And I am Vishal Shah.
Signing out.